What is up, y'all? Kevin Kuhn here from Athlete Factors. This is the Athlete Factors podcast. My guest today is professional runner extraordinaire Jacob Thomson. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad. So I mentioned to you kind of right before we started recording, like I took a kind of a short break from doing the podcast for about 2.5, 3 months or so. And you're my first guest back, and I'm really excited. Yeah, man, I can't wait. So if you will, give us like a little bit of a Cliff's Notes or Sparks Notes version of you.
Yeah. All right. So Jacob Thomson, born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. I've kind of been a little bit all over the place ever since I graduated high school. So I went to NC State in Raleigh for 2 years, and I transferred back, went to University of Kentucky for 3. I moved up to Boston for about 3 years and ran with Adidas and the Boston Athletic Association. And then I moved out to Flagstaff, Arizona last year, and still train and compete professionally out there. And yeah, it's been a pretty fun last 10 years or so of competing at a pretty high level, and look forward to keep doing it, hopefully for another 10.
Sweet. Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, you looking like for a long career? You just gonna dip your toes in and then switch to something else? But that's awesome. Like, longer the better, right?
Yeah, I think the longer the better. I mean, it's something that I started running when I was in 4th grade. I guess that's when I started running cross country and track. I was a big baseball player growing up, though. I played AAU travel baseball and played baseball even my freshman year of high school until I started to get a little bit more serious about running. But yeah, I've been doing it at a fairly high level for a long time, and I really enjoy it. And I'm kind of building, my brand and my businesses around running as well. So yeah, if I'm lucky, I'll never have a desk job and kind of transition from one running thing to the next whenever the time comes.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is as close as I get to a desk job here. Like, I don't want to be stuck in a cubicle, man. So I totally get that. So you said you've competed at a really high level for quite a while now. And I had to do some digging just to kind of remind myself of, what you've been up to. So 5th at Foot Locker Nationals in 2012, right?
Yeah. Went to Foot Locker twice in high school. I was 5th as a senior. And it's really cool because, a lot of guys, if you look at like the top 10 from that race, a lot of guys, it's Cheserek, McGordy, myself. There's like a lot of guys who are I still run all the time or train with, and it's kind of funny. Like, we've basically been chasing each other around doing that since 2012, 2011.
That's so awesome. Yeah. So right around that time, I was finishing up my graduate school internship, and I was working with a professional running club in Indianapolis at the time called the Indiana Invaders. And my grad school project for my internship was to help rehab and get this guy back to racing, back to training and racing. And he was, maybe you might know him. I don't know. We'll see. Nate Browning. He was a 400 runner at UK.
I don't know Nate. No.
He might have been like right before you kind of switched over there. So, but yeah, I thought maybe there would be a little overlap, but yeah, he had a ruptured Achilles tendon. And I think he was like a 46 second 400 runner, and wanted to keep training after college. And
get some good. If you want to be a good middle distance or sprinter, being in the SEC is definitely the way to go, because it's such a high level of competition. Even if you look at Olympic teams and U.S. championships, a lot of it's just littered with SEC middle distance and sprinters. They're pretty unreal to watch.
That's so true, man. So we've got a little glimpse of kind of your athletic background, but tell us a little bit about your life kind of outside of sports.
Outside of sports, so I guess we can talk about, I'm actually sitting in Thomson Training headquarters over here. So this is, Thomas is over there. So as far as a
Nice.
desk job, that's about as close as it gets. We sit there and write training plans, for our athletes, but that's hopefully as close as I ever get to a desk job. But yeah, I started this coaching business in COVID. Kid actually from my hometown, I was living in Boston at the time, and a kid from my hometown reached out, and everything was canceled. His track season was canceled. They couldn't practice or anything. And he's like, "Hey, I want to get better. Like, can you give me some workouts?" And, I just gave him some workouts and, talked to him every once in a while. And then we just kind of kept that communication going, and, eventually turned into, "Hey, will you coach me?" And he got a lot better. He was a sophomore at the time, and he actually just committed. He's going to NC State where I went. So it's kind of cool to see that come full circle. But yeah, it started with that, and then it was really just kind of snowballed into, we're working with about 60 to 70 athletes on a monthly basis. We started a high school running camp, which the first one was this past summer, which was a lot of fun. Bluegrass running camp here in Kentucky, and then started a youth team. And we had 94 runners out on it's like 3rd to 8th grade youth running team. And we got to travel all around with them. And it's been a lot of fun. So all those projects like really keep me busy. Put on a meet this year. First time I ever, put a meet director hat on. So doing a little bit of everything, but it's all so like intertwined that it makes it easy. And, I really enjoy doing it.
That's awesome. So I think I actually came across you via Thomson Training on Instagram. So I guess talk to me a little bit about y'all's coaching philosophy. What kind of, how do you organize their training? How do you work around, like if you are training in Flagstaff, like how are you working with these kids who, could be all over?
Yeah, so we do coach. I guess there's a couple different ways to answer that, because we do work with everybody. I mean, we have 3rd graders that we work with. We have 70-year-olds who we work with, and everywhere in between. I'd say our most popular client right now is probably the high school athletes. We have a lot of high school athletes, and then we're starting to get more and more like road runners and like age group marathoners. People going for a BQ and things like that. But I think it has great upside business wise that's just, limitless, like, there for us to kind of take it on. So we're really kind of continuing to build that part of the business. So, if somebody comes to us and wants a marathon plan, like we basically put together a marathon plan. Adults are obviously a little bit easier as far as like communication, whereas like the high schoolers were a lot more hands-on, talking to them almost, daily via, text or email or phone call or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then Thomas, so most of our clients are here in Kentucky. We are kind of, I think we're in 20 or 21 states now,
Nice.
But probably over half of our clients are here in Kentucky. So like Thomas Cave, who's like co-owner of Thomson Training with me, he does like some in-person sessions, and we try to have a community feel here as much as we can, which is great. Mm-hmm. But then as far as like putting together, I guess to dive into like training philosophy, which I think is where you're headed. So like things that we really do. So, I mean, obviously to start, we kind of do like an intake. What have you been doing? What works for you? Everybody's a little bit different. And I think like when we put together a training plan, I like to work in like, we call them cycles, but we work in like 20-day blocks. So basically 3-week cycles. And one thing I think a lot of people, I wouldn't say necessarily do wrong, but if a lot of high school coaches look at it like, what can I do in the next 8 weeks during this season? It's September 1st. What can I do between now and October 31st state meet? Like, and they only look at that 8-week block. Whereas us, like we're really looking like down the road. And so like, I see training as like a spiral almost, where I should like layer and build on each other over time. So like sophomore year, for example, if we have a sophomore comes to us, like, I'm not really worried how fast they run as a sophomore. I'm much more interested in like giving them the tools and building their like foundation so that they can do the things they need to do as a junior. It's going to set them up to go on and run in college. And the same thing, like, if we get a senior comes to us at Christmas break of their senior year and they're like, hey, this spring is it for me. Like, what can you do to make me bring, because I want to try to run in college. And we had that situation happen last year. It was like a mid 16 runner he was 17th at Kentucky State meet. And he was like, hey, I really want to run in college, but, I'm like right now it's probably not going to happen. And, we're fairly aggressive and accelerated his training program a little bit. And he ended up running 9:03 and winning the state meet. And now he's at the University of Kentucky running as a freshman. So we can come at it from a lot of different angles. Obviously, I think the more time, the better to work with an athlete. But yeah, we don't really control that. We don't go out and reach out to athletes. So it's basically whoever comes to us and kind of what their timeline is and what their goals are. And as far as like building the actual training, like I said, we work in these like 20-day blocks. So like I want to have certain things in each 20-day block. And it's not that every 20 days repeats itself, but like everything kind of, so like if I know, if I'm building a training plan for a cross country season and then we're in June, well, I kind of know the workouts I want you to do in October before the state meet. So then I can kind of unwind that spiral, right? And work backwards. So, if I want to be doing 16 quarters on 45 seconds at your 2 mile pace or 3K pace, like VO2 max pace on, October 10th, weeks before the state meet. Well, what do I need to do 20 days and what do I need to do 20 days before that? And, I can work it all the way back to June or, wherever that is. And I think it's kind of having like a longer term approach and like a little bit more foresight where I'm not worried about, the invitational this weekend. I'm more worried about like, hey, what are we going to be doing in 6 months or 8 months down the road from this? Or like I said, if I get a freshman or a really good freshman right now, he ran between 15:26 and 15:32 5 times this cross country season. It's like very consistent.
Yeah.
In that range. And I told him, I was like, yeah, this track season, like we want to run fast, but like I'm not super worried about what he runs as freshman track season. I'm more worried about can this guy make a Foot Locker or East Bay Nationals next fall, and what steps kind of do we need to take over the next 12 months to make that happen? And more so, I want him to be able to do that for 2 or 3 years in a row, hopefully.
Sure.
So everybody's a little bit different, I guess, but the principles still kind of stay the same as far as like, yeah, we work in these like 20-day cycles. I want to have certain things in each cycle. So like we try to have one like longer, I guess if you're looking at like what makes up a 20-day cycle, like there's one longer tempo or threshold workout. I'm really big on doing like a lot of like threshold reps or like kind of somewhere between like 10K and threshold pace. So we do like a lot of Ks, 800s, miles for the more advanced people. I think that's something we do a lot of, and it's really easy to kind of build workouts off of that. So like, we may do something like 6 by 800 or 5 by K, and then we'll do, 4 by 150, on either end of that. There's some type of hill work in every 20-day block. And then there's also, we kind of work on the spectrums a lot. So like I work on either side of the scale. So like I do a lot of strength threshold stuff and I do a lot of short sprint speed stuff. And then like we hit the hard race pace workouts kind of in when we need to, but that's not something we pound all the time. I think there's like a lot of common myths or like misconceptions that a lot of high school coaches have about training in general, but they kind of like we talked about, like, they like to do these, like we want to train really hard for like 8 or 10 weeks, but then like we're so burnt out and tired, we need to take a big break and then we need to like start all over again. Whereas I view this as like this is a spiral, never really stops. And I think if you train appropriately, so if you're doing a lot of like threshold strength work and you do a decent amount of you're sprinting, not in really high quantities, but like we kind of tap on it like a little bit all the time, you never really get burnt out. You can do threshold work and you can do short sprints. You do both of those once a week all year round and you're never going to get burnt out. What gets you burnt out is like the amount of the intensity, or if the intent, like I feel like a lot of times high school coaches do stuff that's either it's either too hard or it's too easy. Whereas like we kind of do stuff that's challenging, but it never really stops.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we kind of take like I call it active recovery after an end of a season where we'll take, if you need 7 days, you need 15 days, whatever it is. But like I try to get them to run at least every, maybe like it's 1 week of every third day and then 1 week of every other day where you're at least doing like a 30-minute run in strides. And then that actually cuts down our injury rate a ton because a lot of people, they do a ton of like VO2 max stuff all season and then they're tired and burnt out and kind of hurt. And then they take like 2 or 3 weeks of doing nothing. And then they want to like hop back into it. And they're like, oh man, I'm already hurt. And it's like, well, yeah, you don't really have the right foundation to jump in and start doing that kind of work again. Whereas if you would just like keep your body moving a little bit and then you can train more, like you can train a little bit harder and like you're going to get way better progression just because you're not taking these like constant breaks and stuff all the time.
Yeah. If you're not stopping and starting, every at the end of every season and like
people say consistency in training is really important, but like I think they kind of miss like the consistency, like if you're taking a month off 2 or 3 times a year, like if you do that if you look at that over a 4-year period of high school or college, well, then you're actually missing a whole year when you put that all together, right? If you miss 3 or 4 months a year because you're so burnt out from training too hard, there's nothing really consistent about that in my eyes.
For sure. So how would you say this type of coaching and training compares to like when you were in high school?
I think it's really similar. I mean, I had a really good high school coach. I learned a lot of, like, I still bounce stuff off of him all the time. And that's something I really try to take. I've had a lot of really good coaches. Like, I mean, I had a really good high school coach, went to NC State and ran for Coach Geiger, who's been there forever. The women just won the NCAA title. So I learned, picked up stuff there. And then I went to Kentucky, trained under Sean Graham, he was in the OTC, like original group with it was the farm team in Palo Alto and then Oregon Track Club. So he was in the first iteration of that. And, he was 1320 guy back in early 2000s when nobody was really running 1320. And then I also had Haken DeVries, who coached me my 5th year after Coach Graham left. And he was kind of like, he was right. He learned from Vin Lanana, he learned from Jason Dunn, he learned from like all these other great coaches. And then I went to Boston and I ran under Ricardo Santos, who eventually left and took the Stanford job. He's coached a really good collegiate coach. And then after that, I was working with Morgan Husany and Mark Carroll, he's run 1303, back in the 90s when he was kind of the real deal. He ran 350 in the mile and 730 in the 3K, Irish guy. And then once I left Boston this past year, I've been in Flagstaff I went back to Haken was coaching me again, but I was also working with a bunch of coaches and groups in Flagstaff, which was awesome. So I've had a lot of good coaches, I guess, in summary. And I try to kind of take the best things from everybody. And also I just try to read as much as I can. If there's a podcast or an interview or, whatever it is, or I can, I see Mike Smith at a coffee shop and I want to ask him 3 questions while I walk past his table real quick. I kind of try to take all that in and use it how I can, whether it's, with a 6th or 7th grader kid or with a high schooler or with, 35-year-old who's just getting into running and wants to run a marathon. So yeah, it definitely changes depending on the person, but I think like the principles don't change, just the specifics change.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Yeah, that's got to be you've got to be like running into people all the time in Flagstaff where you're just like, oh, hey, that's so and so. And like
Flagstaff is really cool. It's like you can show up for a long run and it can be just you, or you can show up for a long run and there could be 45 people who are all Olympic trials qualifiers. It kind of depends on the time of year and what's going on. But yeah, it's very rare to go on especially long runs, just because everybody wants to meet up for their long runs and stuff. It's very rare to not mesh in with several groups out there while you're doing that.
Yeah. So speaking of Flagstaff. I've recently came across the Sweat Elite channel on YouTube, and it's blowing up. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that, you had your own episode, on this channel. So first of all, like, what's that like being featured, on the Sweat Elite channel, where like he's in Kenya, and then he's in Mexico, and then he's in Spain, and he's like, this guy's all over the place filming these super elite, workout sessions with all these amazing runners. It's incredible to watch. Like, I'm obsessed with it.
I watched about everything that Matt puts out on Sweat Elite. Matt Fox does a great job with that channel. I'd followed the channel a little bit, and then they came to Flagstaff to they basically just send somebody a message like, hey, you got any workouts this week? I'm gonna be in Flagstaff. And they have such a big following that obviously everybody wants to do it. So that was great, because like I was actually going to be, that was one of the rare times I was going to be completely solo for that session, and run 16 by K that day, and doing that by myself on Lake Mary like would have been pretty tough. But knowing that I had Matt biking next to me with the camera, and tons of people were going to see it on YouTube was a little extra motivation. That was great. I mean, he actually was at the Chicago Marathon too, so like met up and got some drinks afterwards. And yeah, Matt's a great guy, putting out great content, and I think that's another reason like you see people getting a lot faster, whether it's kids or college runners or post collegiates now. Is just, there's so much more information. I mean, it's easy to get. Like, you want to know how anybody trains, like there's probably a YouTube video, and you can probably listen to an interview, and you can probably read a book that's one of their coaches wrote. So it's the access to information now is so easily available that people train smarter, and people are training harder, and people are getting faster.
Yeah, I love that. Like, running is still a super tight knit community. Like, at the end of the day, like, you can ask somebody how they're training, or you can ask somebody for help, or like, people in this sport aren't like, oh, that's a secret, I'm not going to tell you. Like, who isn't an open book at the end of the day, which is, it's incredible. I love it. Like when I was reaching out to you, like, yeah, sure, let's do an episode, let's talk. Like, I love it. So that episode was a couple weeks prior to Chicago. So for those who don't know, fill us in on kind of how the rest of your training for Chicago went, and then how your race went.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the end there. I was 12th at Chicago, seventh American. In my debut.
Let's go.
Yeah, so I wanted to run quite a bit quicker. I thought on a good day I could run 2:10. The average day would have been 2:12. Ended up running 2:15, but I think I competed pretty well. Just like wasn't great conditions really to run super fast, which makes like Galen and those guys run so fast up front even more impressive. If they would have gotten a good day, that would have been like probably a crazy fast race. But training went really well. So I guess to backtrack then where it started, I ran the Olympic trials at the 10K, took a little 2-week kind of reset after that, and then basically did a 12-week marathon cycle, which was fairly short. But I'd always been kind of a high mileage guy. I think probably started my junior year of college. I started running 100-mile weeks, not every week, but fairly consistently. I always ran like the most on the team by a pretty good amount. Would be running 90s to low hundreds most of the year. And then, so I got that volume up to, I was running 120 miles a week for a 4-week chunk. I think that was a big thing. And then just I really love training at altitude. I think that was a big factor to me. I mean, it's why I moved to Flagstaff. I was like, you can only train at this high level for so long. And I'd been in Boston, and something needed to change. So I was like, where can I go that would be the best place for me to train? And I thought it was Flagstaff. So I loaded up my car and headed there. So that was great. And then you get so many people to jump in and out of workouts and long runs and stuff like that with. There's always, if you need somebody to hold a bottle for you on a long run, like you can pretty much always find somebody. Everybody's willing to help out, which is great. But then as far as workout wise, I actually started doing some like double threshold sessions, which I think was pretty beneficial for me, where I would do 7-8 miles of work in the morning around marathon down to half marathon pace, and then come back in the afternoon and do another 8K usually of work.
Mhm.
And that's something I think you see like getting. It's another thing like people didn't really. I feel like most people I didn't really know what it was at least, but then I see that NAU's doing it. I see that Molly Seidel's doing it. I see
Mhm.
the Ingebrigtsens are doing it. Like it's something that paid big dividends for a lot of people. So I started incorporating those kind of sessions in. Do one
Mhm.
about every 10 days. I think I did 4 of them in total, where I'll do
So yeah,
stuff.
like previously, and like this is still relatively new to me, but like the concept was always, alternate the intensity of your session. So if you're going to do 2 sessions in a day, one's going to be easy and one's going to be hard, but you're talking about accumulating a lot more volume close to your race pace or close to that threshold pace. And like that over the entire course of a training cycle and then layered on top of multiple training cycles, like that's where a lot more benefit can come.
Yeah, and I think that's something that like people say like the shoes are making things a lot faster, and I think they definitely are. But the biggest thing for me is when I wear those shoes, I recover so much quicker. So like if I was in like regular flats, like my Achilles and like everything would probably be so jacked up after doing 12K of work in the morning that I wouldn't be able to come back and do another 8 or 10K of work in the evening.
Sure.
But most of the time I felt better on the second session.
Hmm.
So I would do stuff like 6 by 2K in the morning and then 8 by K in the evening, and they'd all be roughly this. I may run 6 10s for the 2Ks in the morning and then 3 flats for the Ks in the evening. So they're fairly similar pace. I mean, this is at at 7,000 feet on the road.
Mhm.
But being able to recover so much quicker with the super shoes is kept you a lot healthier and allow you to do that level of training where, yeah, I have no doubt if I was in some regular flats, I wouldn't have been able to do it, certainly.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing I did a lot of. Getting used to like taking fluids and stuff like that was pretty big.
Mhm.
Just because something you don't really think of, especially coming off the track. Like I've never taken, even when I do road races, I've never taken fluids or anything like that before. You
Mhm.
don't do it even in a half marathon. So getting used to that and training and just like training your gut to be able to take in, excuse me,
Mhm.
taking calories. I took in probably close to 800 calories during the Chicago Marathon, which is what most elites are doing now. And I think people don't really. Certainly didn't realize it was that much until I started talking to other marathoners. And like I said, Haken at the University of Kentucky was coaching me, and that was one thing. He was like, "Hey, you need to find somebody and talk to him about this because like I know it's important, but obviously coaching at the college level, like he didn't really know that much about it. So
Sure.
we basically found a lot of ways to incorporate that in practice, which was great.
So my biochemistry like nerd is coming out a little bit. So how are you chunking those calories out? Like is that, I mean, like I know it's like probably evenly split between the bottles, but like are you going for a certain threshold of calories or a certain gram
Yeah, I was trying
dose?
to get 100 calories every 5K, starting at 10K. So I skipped the 5K bottle, and starting at 10K, I would take a bottle every 5K and try to get on 100 calories, which I practiced that. There's actually a 3-mile loop that we did a lot of like our marathon specific workouts on. So it's perfect.
Mhm.
You set up one table and put 6 bottles on it and go do your workout. And every time you finish the loop, you grab a bottle.
Mhm.
But then like when I was doing workouts, say I was, I'd even practice it like if I was doing 20 by 400 on the track, like I would just like the practice, like grabbing the bottle and drinking stuff while you're running that's hard in and of itself. And then like
Sure.
also got to train your gut to be able to digest it. So I would tinker it and try to do it a lot of different ways in practice. But then, yeah, as far as like the long runs, when I was, I'd call them like when I was doing marathon workouts in a long run, I would do it every every three miles of 5K, just so it's as specific as it could be before the race.
Yeah. So that's I think it's so cool that you can not only, physically train the body, but like the digestive system is extremely adaptive as well. In general, and maybe I'm a little dated with some of these numbers, but for a long time, the idea was the human body can really only utilize about 60 grams of carbs per hour, or about 250 calories per hour. But I mean, that's based off research that's looking at, mean, median, mode. Let's try to, it's not necessarily looking at if your body is extremely adaptive, can you utilize more? And it was also only looking at one type of carbohydrate at a time. So are you ingesting different types of carbohydrates, or is it all one type? And
So I use Morton, and I try to do the gels just so I could split up my like water source and fuel source, just in case like I couldn't for some reason get down one of the two. If they're mixed together in a bottle, obviously if you need the fluid, you got to take what's
more
mixed
carbs
to get it. But I couldn't. That was one thing I tried it for 3 or 4 workouts, and I was basically throwing up at the end of every workout. So I just switched to doing the drink mix, and it worked. It worked really well for me. I worked with a guy who runs with Nick Willis and Hobbs in the very nice track club group. He's a biomedical guy, and that's he studies endurance sport. And he basically said exactly what you said. Like it used to be they didn't think you could do this, but basically from all the new research, a lot of it's through cycling, and then so they learned a lot. Like Nike people learned a lot doing the breaking two, and with all the research they were doing. You can train your gut to take it. You just got to practice. So I was trying to practice at least once a week for the last like 6 to 8 weeks going into it, and then I'd practice every long run as well.
Nice. And the more, like, if you can utilize more digested carbohydrate, and that's saving not only stored fuel for when you might want it towards the end of the race, or you're also limiting the breakdown of muscle tissue and converting that into energy. Like the less that you have to do that, the more you're maintaining your quote unquote engine, like the higher you can rev that thing. So
you can basically keep yourself from going into like metabolic bonking. Like
exactly.
We're talking about hitting the wall. I still hit a wall, but I don't think it was from fuel at all. It was just you're still gonna hit a wall in a marathon at some point.
It's a marathon. Yeah. It's just one of those things that's probably gonna happen. Well, that's so awesome, man. Like I love that like things are advancing in the sport, and it's not just the shoes, it's elsewhere. It's recovery modalities, it's strength and conditioning, it's injury prevention, it's nutrition, it's stuff like that. And I think that's pretty awesome. So while I'm kind of down that road, are there any specific recovery modalities that you find to be extremely helpful and useful?
I think the 2 biggest ones that I would say I guess are most useful, that like I preach the most. I think sleep is probably the best. Like you can spend $2,000 on a Normatec, or you can get an extra hour of sleep every night. I would say get the extra hour of sleep like 10 times out of 10. That's one thing that I certainly wasn't good with in high school and college. But since like moving to Flagstaff, I would leave my phone in the kitchen. Like I wouldn't even take my phone in the bedroom. Like especially when I was running 120 miles a week and training that hard, I was like, sleep is like, I'm going to be in bed 9 hours a night. And I was very, very consistent and religious about that. And that's something that, I've stayed very injury free and was able to train at a really high level. And I think if you're getting 6 hours or 7 hours, like that probably wouldn't have happened. And another thing, I guess, that goes into the recovery, I found a lot of like hip mobility is huge. I don't know if you put that technically in, or what you think of as recovery, but I try to do some type of hip mobility at least like 4 or 5 days a week, and it doesn't have to be some like big strenuous weight room program. And I find that a lot with our clients. If you can have like really healthy glutes, hip flexors, hamstrings, all that is like sound, like you're going to eliminate a lot of your running problems. Because I've found like even if you have a problem in your shin or ankle or something like that, it's probably coming from, it's like stemming from some root problem you have in the hip region or pelvic region. So yeah, I'm definitely really big on, I guess like supplemental training, like, because it kind of goes back to like, it allows you to train more and train a little bit harder and train more consistently because you're not on the sidelines with an injury. So yeah, I guess in that sense, it definitely falls under the recovery category.
For sure. Yeah. So as a kinesiologist, like when a runner or a cyclist or a triathlete comes to see me, it's typically because something's hurting and they can't, swim, bike, or run. And I'll take them through, some static assessments. I'll just see what their body naturally does. Like I put them on my assessment table and I'm checking hamstring length and I'm checking hip flexor length and I'm doing all this stuff so that I can see where their body is naturally holding tension. Because if you do the same movement patterns over and over and over and over and over again, you're telling the body, hey, we need to be really efficient at this. So let's not waste any extra energy or any extra like nervous system stimulus to access what we don't need, right? So if all you do is run and you're not making sure that your glutes are firing properly and that you can access full hip extension and that your hip flexors are working well and you can access full hip flexion, if you're not doing that, like just going out and running isn't going to allow you to access that. You have to be deliberate about making sure that your body can utilize all these things so that you're as athletic as possible. And if you're athletic and you can access these ranges of motion, then you're probably going to be more resilient.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I'm realizing now coming out of that marathon cycle. It took me a long time. Like I did not feel good for a long time. And I think it's because I got so far away from things I was doing on the track. I wasn't sprinting, like I wasn't doing all these things and yeah, basically my hip flexors forgot how to work. My quads were all messed up. Like I had all these problems. So yeah, like now I'm on, I'm on the wicket, like the small wicket hurdles, doing sprint, like doing flying 50s. And yeah, I'm not going to break the record in the 100-meter dash, but like, I think training those things is important. That goes back to like, the speed, like I'm really big on our kids that we're working with doing speed work year round, at least every 10 days, probably more like at least once a week, we're doing, some type of, 50 accelerations or, 80-meter hill strides, like whatever it is, because I think you don't have to do a ton of it, but you have to like constantly be touching on that. Just like you said, if you never do it, and then all of a sudden it's the end of the season and coach is like, all right, let's go rip 200. It's like, well, you can't just do, that's not really how it was. People don't understand that's not how it works at all. So that's something people are like, oh, if you sprint too early in the season, you're going to burn out. And I was like, you think, going back to UK, like Abby Steiner just broke the collegiate 300-meter record in December. Do you not think she's going to be like ready to throw down in June at NCAA's? Like she definitely will be. And she didn't get that way by not sprinting in October and September, even though her main races are going to be in May and June. So it's not about the intensity. It's about like, I guess how like the duration of your intensity is what I think people get wrong a lot of times.
Yeah. I think, speaking of, Coach Mike Smith, one of the things I heard him say in I think it was a flow track video was, or maybe it was Sweat Elite. Oh, well, I don't remember. Anyway, he said it was about a specific workout. And he said, it's not the intensity that's going to get you. And it's not the volume that's going to get you. It's the intensity of the volume that's going to get you. Like, so yeah, like you can, if you're not working on your speed all the time, then your ability to train just speed when it comes time for you to be fast, like you're going to be limited. But if you're working on it year round, then you don't have to go all in. You don't have to be at, 10 out of 10 on your intensity spectrum, or on your effort.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, totally. I think we try to do a little bit of everything all the time, pretty much. And yeah, a lot of people, I don't know if they just don't know or they just don't get it. But yeah, we see really good success with that, and it's something we're gonna keep doing. And yeah, I think that's, people are, obviously figuring out how to train. I mean, but right before there's a Galen Rupp story, I guess, talking about Flagstaff. He was training in Flagstaff right before Tokyo this summer, and I happened to be doing my double, and I went past the NAU track, and he's out there with Mike Smith doing hundreds over wickets, running 12-point hundreds over wickets, 2 weeks before he's going to Tokyo. I was like, yeah, this guy's training to run a marathon. He's still running 12-second hundreds over wickets. Like, like everything kind of works together. And people just don't really, I don't know. I feel like that's a missed opportunity for especially a lot of high school runners.
Yeah, man, I think a lot of that stems from the idea that like, and maybe some of this is like self-imposed, but like how many runners consider themselves athletes? They're like, no, like I'm a runner. Like, well, you'd be a better runner if you were also an athlete and if you did things that made you more athletic. Like, so I think a lot of that's changing. Like when I was in college, I graduated high school in 2005. Like we didn't do any stuff in the weight room. Like, I mean, we had access to a weight room, but like we didn't really do anything. And like in college, it was kind of like, yeah, I mean, you guys can do stuff if you want. Like the track team, they work out at this time, but during cross country, it's kind of like up to you. Like nowadays, like people are understanding the value of like, yeah, you don't have to do traditional weightlifting, but like you should be doing some sort of progressive overload to ensure that your bones are strong and to ensure that you can generate, a lot of force. And in the same way that these running shoes can make you more efficient and improve your running economy, like having a really strong posterior chain and having really resilient Achilles tendons improves running economy too. Like there's
everything works. Yeah, everything works together for sure.
So so let's take it back a little bit to kind of when it comes to coaching specifically, and not so much like the X's and O's of your programming, but like what are some of the pillars of coaching? What are some of the things you find yourself saying maybe on a consistent basis, or maybe to an athlete in a specific situation that that helps you reinforce like, hey, here's what our priorities are. Here's some things I want you to focus on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm trying to think of something like really specific, but I mean, I do harp on consistency like all the time, and I'm also really big on. I think a lot of people want like results really, really quickly, right? Like, and like for example, if a kid comes to us and it's like, hey, I want to run this like in 2 months, like during indoor season, and it's like, if that. I basically see ourselves as like we sit down with the athlete, they come up with goals, and then we put the training plan together to help them meet their goals. But I'm a very blunt, I guess is like a good way to put it. And I'm like, hey, these things like take time. If we do try to ramp up to that this quickly, like, here are the risk factors that come with it. And I think shooting it straight, I don't really blow sunshine to people. Thomas is the same way. Like, I think people are capable of doing a lot more than they think, but I think they underestimate the amount of time and like consistency that's going to take to get to their goals a lot of times. So I think like because usually, if you go to a coach and you tell them something like that, they're like, oh yeah, like they're all rah, let's go. And we're, maybe I'm more to, hey, let's pump the brakes and like figure out like the steps that you're going to like the smartest steps to take to get to that goal. Which obviously like isn't what people want to hear all the time. But I think, for their long-term development and stuff like that, I think that it's really important that they are realistic and they do understand what it takes. And I'm also one to break out the charts and be like, yeah, this is why we're doing this workout. It's because I want you to be ready to do this that's already planned 20 days from now, and like that's going to set you up for the next. I want them to like understand we're not just like showing up and thinking of a workout on the spot. Like everything's a stepping stone to get to the next stepping stone, to get to the whatever the ultimate end goal, whatever the end of that spiral is. Like that's whether it's to BQ, or whether it's to win a state championship, or whether it's to break 20 minutes in the 5K for the first time. Like everybody has what's really important to them, and like we just kind of make sure they understand what it takes to get to that.
Yeah. Do you find yourself maybe wording it that way isn't so good. I find myself all the time wanting to explain to my athletes, here's why we're doing this today. And like, I want them to know, I want them to understand everything that we're doing. I don't want them just to show up and just do it. Like, yeah, like they'll show up, they'll be present, they'll do it. But like, I want them to understand, like, hey, remember what we did last week on this day. And then here's how this specific thing is progressing, or here's why we're not doing what we did last week, because we've got this thing planned, 5 days from now, or whatever the case is. So like, I find myself having to be like, hey, Kevin, they don't care. Like some kids do.
Yeah, I definitely have a tendency, I guess, to over-explain a little bit. I think what's good about what we do too is that most people who come to us looking for help, they're coming to us to look for help because they're interested. So like, we don't really, if you coached at a regular high school, you're probably going to have half your team who's like super into it, and then you're going to have half the team who's like, all right, coach, just like give me the workout and go away. Like, I'll go do it. And you have, another part that's probably like hiding in the bathroom or something. So like, we only get like the first part of that with what we do. Everybody, you're not going to pay for a private coach if you're not super into it, and you're not, I don't have to worry about kids skipping runs and things like that, because, well, yeah, if they do, like, they're not getting what they're paying for.
Sure.
That's on them, not on me. So yeah, luckily I do. Most people, I would say the vast majority of the people we work with, like, do want to understand and do. So I get to explain and not feel too guilty about it, I guess.
That's awesome. So for anybody who's listening right now, and they want to get faster, they want to be a better runner, like what are some pieces of advice that from lessons that you've either learned the hard way, or just lessons that you've picked up in a pretty long career so far, that you can share?
I think, just like a real, like, zoomed out view is like, you got to get started. Something is almost always better than nothing. I see a lot of people who, like, they want to do this and they want to do that, but like, they don't maybe know the perfect way to go about it, so they just never start. And then obviously it's never going to happen if you never start. I find a lot of people who come to us for coaching, say it's, a 35-year-old who wants to BQ or something like that, comes to us for coaching. Well, they found us because they were out there trying a lot of things, and, some of those things didn't work. And, now they want the next level of help to kind of understand what to do. But if they had never started down that path and just always said, like, man, I hope I could BQ next year, like, they would have never ended up where they are now. So I think getting started is a big one. And then just know that things take time, especially running. Like, it's not something, it's like going to the gym, for example. You go to the gym, you lift like crazy for an hour until your arms are shaking and you can't take it anymore. But you go home and look in the mirror and, like, you look the same until you do that for a month or 2 months or 3 months. And then all of a sudden you start to see the benefits. But it's like, yeah, you can go run, you can go out there and make yourself run 20 miles and run until you drop. And then, like, you're probably not going to run again for 2 or 3 weeks. Probably better to just be consistent with it and, run a half an hour every day until you can do 45 minutes every day. And then, then you start be more interested in running and figure out, you join running groups. And so I think that's another thing, is like, you got to get started and then you got to be consistent. And if you can do those 2 steps, like, that's over half the battle right there.
Yeah. It's, That's not the fancy, sexy, crazy, unique piece of advice that everybody wants, but like that's the stuff you got to do. You got to show up and you got to put in some work consistently. So, how can people find you on social media? How can they reach out to you if they want, if they want you to coach them?
Yeah, I got personally, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook under Jacob Thomson, and then also under Thomson Training. Also on website or type it into Google on Instagram or whatever you want to do. Yeah, that's the easiest way to find us. Yeah, like I said, I mean, we kind of coach everybody we have like a youth team that's more locally based here. That's all from like 3rd to 8th graders. And then from high school up, we coach virtually in 20 states now. So we're kind of looking forward to doing that, whether it's, like I said, we got everywhere from 3rd grade to 70 years old and pretty much everywhere in between, from first time runners to really seasoned runners to, I think last year we had 12 kids commit to go run in college, and this year we're at 6 or 7 with a bunch more probably deciding in the coming weeks.
That's awesome.
We kind of have a lot of different things going on. And another thing I'd like to talk about, if we have a couple minutes, is talk about so I've actually recently signed with Under Armour in Flagstaff. So I guess to backtrack a little bit, like when I moved out there, I was training a lot with a guy being Sambasa, who just won the U.S. Road Championships, like a year-long circuit. I was training with him, and I showed up to some group runs like you do in Flagstaff, I guess. And Stephen Haas, who's a main contact out there for a lot of people, basically said I was always welcome to join that group on their workout days or on their easy run days. So I went to a lot of their runs and got to be really close with a lot of those guys. And just actually got a contract offer from Under Armour to officially join Dark Sky, which I think would be great. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, one thing I'm like pretty excited about with, it's obviously great to I've been unsponsored for the last year. So just making my living through Thomson Training. So now it'd be nice to have both of those from a personal side, but it's also really great because they're very interested in what we're doing. I guess like in our call it grassroots programs, Thomson Training, the youth club team that we had, the high school running camp we put on. It's like they stepped up to sponsor the running camp for the next 3 years, and I'm really thankful to them for that. But I'm excited because you don't really think when you think running, everybody thinks Nike, and then they probably think Adidas, and a lot of times some of those other brands don't really get the recognition that they should. But I think especially when you see the stuff that somebody like Bia Sambasa is doing right now, or Wayne Kaladi is doing right now, they're putting together a very good team, and you're in probably the best place in the entire world to train in Flagstaff. And yeah, I think over the next year, like you're going to start seeing Under Armour a lot more in running circles, and that's something I'm really excited to be a part of. Nice.
That's really cool. Yeah, I had written a note up here to make sure that we talked about that before we finished up. So congrats on that, man. That's really cool.
Yeah. That's really cool. Super thankful to, I mean, I guess I still considered myself a professional runner last year, even when I was unsponsored. I was in the Tracksmith amateur support program, but I had a great time with them. And yeah, I think with the resources that they're putting into this team and the collection of athletes that they started to put together in Flagstaff, it's going to be a really special group. And yeah, I'm home for the holidays right now, back in Kentucky, and then I head out on January 2nd back to Flagstaff, and can't wait to get back to work with the group. And yeah, big things ahead for that crew.
That's going to be awesome, man. And that just reminded me of you brought up Nick Willis earlier, and then talking about Tracksmith. New Year's Eve, he's going for 20 consecutive years of sub 4-minute miles. How crazy is that?
That's pretty crazy. I broke sub 4 right after I graduated, in 3:57, and I thought about like starting a streak. I mean, I guess if you're a miler, you're going to race a lot more miles. I'm probably predominantly more, at the time I was 5K, 10K, so I'd dip down and do a mile every once in a while. but then the next summer I think I only ran 1 mile, and I ran 4:03 in like a tactical mile race, and I was like, oh man, well, there goes all my chances at any street ever. But I think he's been doing it for 20 years. I mean, I don't doubt that he's going to get it. He works out with Hobbs and Mason, and I saw Hobbs ran 4:01 in the middle of a workout the other day. So if he's anywhere close to working out with Hobbs these days, I'm sure he's going to get it.
Yeah, that's got to be a fun group to work out with. All of their videos, very nice track club. Those they crack me up, man. Those guys are goofy.
They're a good group of guys. I guess Hobbs is out in Flagstaff part of the year, and then back in Michigan part of the year because he was going to go to NAU. But yeah, I got to meet him a little bit over the summer. He's definitely got a very bright future ahead of him.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's so awesome. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, man. This has been a ton of fun and an excellent way to kind of get back into this podcast, man. So thanks so much for the time, and thank you for sharing all of your experience and knowledge. And just doing this sort of thing helps keep me sharp and keeps me, motivated to continue.
I'm definitely a running junkie, so I could sit around and talk shop all day. So any opportunity I have to do that, is very appreciated. So thank you for having me on, Kevin.
Sure, man. We'll have to get you back on again in the future to talk about more of your races and share more of your coaching success as well and all of that. So,
all right. Well, I appreciate it.
For sure. Alrighty, y'all. Thanks for watching and listening. Go follow Jacob. Go check out Thomson Training, and stay tuned for next episode. Adios.